The wood of the crates was fresh and smelled of pine. The nails driven into the lids were bright and new. Someone had just finished packing the shipment. The cargo was meant to last forever. They found the car on a Tuesday morning in late October 1954, a blue Ford sedan, parked crookedly on the shoulder of Route 9, 10 miles from the nearest town. The driver's side door was open. The keys were still in the ignition. Deputy Harlan arrived at 8:45 a.m. He noted the engine was cold. The seats were empty. Inside the vehicle, 2 suitcases sat in the back. A map of the mountainous region lay unfolded on the dashboard, a red circle drawn around a campsite near the Greenbrier River. The registration belonged to Thomas and Martha Miller. They were 24 and 22. They had left Charleston on Friday for a weekend trip. By Tuesday, they should have been back at work. The search began at noon. 20 men, 3 tracking units, and a local timber crew combed the woods on both sides of the highway. The terrain was steep, choked with laurel and oak. For 2 days, they found nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric. It was as if the Millers had stepped out of their car and evaporated into the mist that clung to the ridges. On the 3rd day, the search radius expanded to the only structure within 5 miles, a roadside trading post and gas station owned by a man named Samuel Stanton. Stanton was a recluse, a man who sold gasoline and soda to travelers but rarely spoke. Locals avoided him. He had eyes that looked through you, assessing something only he could see. Deputy Harlan pulled up to the station at 10 a.m. The pumps were locked. The closed sign hung in the window, dusty and crooked. He knocked. No answer. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of the wind rattling the tin roof. Harlan tried the door. It was unlocked. He drew his service weapon and stepped inside. The front room was ordered. Cans of soup stacked in pyramids, a register sitting open and empty, a cigarette burned in the ashtray, a long column of gray ash that hadn't yet fallen. The coffee pot was warm. Stanton hadn't been gone long. Harlan called out, identifying himself. The only answer was the low, droning sound of a refrigerator in the back. Harlan moved to the back office. It was sparse. A cot, a desk, a single chair. On the desk lay a ledger. It looked like a standard accounting book. Harlan opened it. It wasn't sales records, it was a log. Names, dates, times, and a column labeled assessment. The last entry was dated October 24th. Thomas and Martha Miller. The assessment for Thomas read, structure inadequate, calcium deficiency, rejected. The assessment for Martha read, structure optimal, symmetry confirmed, retained. Harlan felt the air in the room drop 10 degrees. He radioed for backup. He didn't know what retained meant, but he knew they needed shovels. While waiting for the state police, Harlan found a rug in the corner that didn't sit right. He pulled it back. Beneath lay a heavy wooden trapdoor, secured with a padlock that had been recently cut. The metal was bright and scratched. Stanton had left in a hurry. Harlan lifted the door. The smell that rose up was chemical, sharp, and blinding. It wasn't a basement. It was a processing area. The state police arrived at 1:15 p.m. They descended the stairs wearing handkerchiefs over their faces. The room was lined with concrete. Along the north wall, steel shelves held rows of glass jars, gallon-sized, sealed with wax. Inside, biological specimens floated in a clear, viscous fluid. The specimens were human. tissue samples, organs, sections of bone. Each jar was labeled with a date and a subject number. The preservation was flawless, no decay, no discoloration. The fluid wasn't formaldehyde, it was something thicker, something Stanton had brewed himself. The police photographer began documenting the collection, his hands shaking as he changed the film. In the center of the room stood 2 examination tables. Leather straps were bolted to the metal frames. On the left table, they found Thomas Miller. He was deceased. His body was intact but rigid. His skin had taken on a gray, pallid quality, with the tissue appearing thin and stretched. He looked like a statue carved from wax. The coroner noted no external wounds. The cause of death wasn't trauma, it was ingestion. On a nearby tray sat a beaker containing a residue of the same clear fluid found in the jars. Stanton hadn't forced them. The evidence suggested a test, a choice, a toxic ritual to determine who was worthy of his collection. Thomas had failed, but the second table was empty. The straps were unbuckled. Martha Miller was gone. The ledger said she was retained. The room offered no clues to her location, just the empty table and a set of muddy boot prints leading to a heavy steel door on the south wall. The prints were deep, the stride was long. The stride. They forced the steel door. It led to a tunnel, hand-dug and shored up with timber. It ran 40 yards underground, emerging in a dense thicket of rhododendron behind the property. Tire tracks cut deep into the soft earth. Heavy tread. A truck. The tracks headed west, onto an old logging road that didn't appear on the county map. The manhunt intensified. Roadblocks were set up across 3 counties. Every blue truck was stopped and searched. The FBI joined the investigation on November 2nd. They profiled Stanton as a collector, a man driven by a specific aesthetic obsession. He wasn't killing for pleasure, he was curating, and he had taken his prize. Back at the station, forensics analyzed the fluid. It was a complex mixture of arsenic, zinc chloride, and proprietary compounds common in the 1920s, but obsolete by the 1950s. It hardened tissue, stopped time. Stanton wasn't just preserving them. He was turning them into durable materials. They found more journals in the tunnel. Stanton wrote about the Great Decay. He believed humanity was softening, rotting from the inside. He sought subjects who could withstand his process. Keepers, he called them. Those who drank the fluid and didn't expire immediately were considered genetically superior, worthy of the next stage. The logs revealed the scope. The collection went back 20 years. Drifters, hitchhikers, those who wouldn't be missed. Stanton had operated in silence, a predator camouflaged by the isolation of the mountains. The jars in the basement were just the failures, the samples he kept for study. The successes were somewhere else. On November 12th, a hunter found the getaway truck. It was abandoned in a ravine 20 miles west, covered in branches. The engine block was cracked. The bed was empty. But in the cargo area, forensics found traces of the clear fluid and a woman's shoe. Size 6. Martha Miller's size. The trail went cold at the ravine. Dogs tracked a scent for 2 miles before losing it at a creek bed. Stanton knew the terrain better than the search teams. He moved like a ghost. The authorities expanded the search to the caves and the limestone ridges, but the system was vast. Thousands of miles of darkness. The forensic analysis of Thomas Miller's body revealed the horror of the process. The fluid didn't kill instantly. It paralyzed. The subject remained conscious, while their circulatory system was slowly replaced. It was a calcification of the living. Thomas had died because his heart stopped. Stanton viewed this as a biological flaw. The winter of 1954 was brutal. Snow buried the ridges, halting the search. The case remained open, a wound in the community. Martha Miller's parents waited by the phone. Every ring was a spike of hope and terror. They didn't care about justice anymore. They just wanted to know if she was in a jar or in the ground. In March 1955, a thaw revealed a shallow grave near the ravine. It wasn't Martha. It was 3 other subjects. Older, decades of decomposition. They were the early experiments, the ones before Stanton perfected his formula. Their bones showed signs of chemical pitting. He had been practicing for a long time. The discovery of the grave confirmed the timeline. Stanton had been active since the 1930s. He had watched the highway, assessed the travelers, and selected his specimens. The trading post was just a filter, a way to bring the world to his lab. Investigators returned to the station logs. They looked for a pattern in the retained entries. There were 12 names over 20 years. 12 subjects who had passed the test. 12 people who had vanished without a trace. Martha Miller was number 12. Stanton wasn't running. He was relocating his gallery. April 1955. A hiker found a metal canister wedged in a rock crevice 5 miles from the truck. Inside was a final logbook. The entries were erratic. Stanton's handwriting was deteriorating. He wrote about the final preservation. He believed he had achieved the perfect mixture. He no longer needed the station. The last page contained a list of coordinates. They didn't match any map. They were coded. A cipher based on the periodic table. The FBI code breakers went to work. It took them 3 weeks. The coordinates pointed to a location deep in the Monongahela National Forest, a place known as Dead Man's Hollow. A tactical team was assembled. They hiked in at dawn on May 14th. The hollow was a box canyon accessible only by a single deer trail. At the end of the canyon stood a cabin. It was built of rough-hewn logs, windowless, with a heavy slate roof. Smoke rose from the chimney. They breached the door at 6 a.m. The interior was warm. A fire burned in the hearth. But the room was empty of life. In the center stood 12 large wooden crates. They were arranged in a circle, facing inward. The lids were nailed shut. The team pried open the first crate. It contained a subject from 1948. A man listed in the ledger as retained. He was encased in a block of amber-colored resin, perfectly preserved. His eyes were open. He looked like he was holding his breath. They moved to the last crate. The wood was fresh. The nails were bright. They lifted the lid. Inside was Martha Miller. She was encased in the same resin. Her hands were folded on her chest. She looked peaceful, artificial, a specimen frozen in a moment of terror. But there was no 13th crate, no Stanton. The cabin was clean, no food, no bedding, just the collection. He had brought them here, secured them, and left. The fire in the hearth was timed. A slow-burning log designed to last hours. He had been gone for days. A search of the perimeter revealed a single set of tracks leading up the canyon wall. A climb that should have been impossible for a man of Stanton's age. He had ascended the sheer rock face and disappeared into the high wilderness. He left his life's work behind. The authorities realized the grim truth. The collection wasn't for him. It was a monument. He had finished his work. The preservation was complete. He had no further use for the subjects. He left them to be found, to be admired, to be studied. The 12 subjects were transported to the state morgue. Medical examiners attempted to reverse the process, to dissolve the resin. It was impossible. The chemical bond was permanent. To remove the resin would be to destroy the subject. They were trapped forever in Stanton's amber. Thomas Miller was buried in the family plot. Martha Miller was classified as medical evidence. Her parents fought for the release of her body, but the state argued she was a biohazard, a chemical anomaly. She remained in storage, a silent witness to a science that shouldn't exist. The investigation into Samuel Stanton continued for decades. There were sightings. A man matching his description in Montana, another in Alaska, always near remote highways, always watching. But he was never apprehended. He became a ghost story told at truck stops. In 1962, a similar case occurred in Oregon. A roadside motel where guests vanished. The proprietor disappeared before police arrived. In the basement, they found jars. The fluid was the same. The handwriting in the ledger was the same. Stanton hadn't stopped. He had just started over. The Stanton Trading Post was burned to the ground by the county in 1956. The land was seized and fenced off. The soil tested high for arsenic and heavy metals. Nothing grew there for 30 years. It remained a scar on the side of Route 9. The files on the Stanton case were sealed. The public was told the Millers were victims of a robbery gone wrong. The detail about the resin was suppressed. The government didn't want to admit that a man with a 4th grade education had outpaced modern chemistry in a basement in West Virginia. Martha Miller's case file remains open. Her status is listed as recovered, but she was never truly returned. She sits in a climate-controlled room in a federal facility, subject number 12. Perfect, unchanging, waiting. Samuel Stanton was never declared dead. His warrant is still active. If he is alive, he would be over 100 years old. But given his knowledge of preservation, his understanding of how to stop the clock, investigators have always wondered if he applied the process to himself. The silence of the West Virginia woods keeps its secrets. The 12 crates were the only testimony Stanton ever gave. He judged the world, found it wanting, and created his own. And somewhere perhaps, he is still watching the road, waiting for the next traveler to pass the test.